It's been an exciting morning, and we've been here 3 years, and I can sense the progress, and that's fun to see. You're also hearing a lot of people talk about learning from mistakes, and which means they dove in and they're trying, and this is an iterative process for sure. As we're going to think about our talk this morning, we agree with what we're hearing. It's a digital world. There's a lot of cool innovations. Pepper's amazing. You're also hearing. We're talking about money and finances, and there's a human component to it for sure. So I don't think we want to be pessimists, we want to be realists, and we want to remind you, and we heard this last year, it's not just about your North Star, it's about your entire network. And that is a huge, daunting challenge, and we think we have a methodology to talk to you about today that can help you. And as you think about that North Star, it is a way to help you go forwards and backwards, and that's how we're framing our takeaways. So. First of all, something that's not a new concept, but we want to remind you to, not change everything you're doing as you face innovation. Thinking about formats, and that's something Gina's going to talk about, how to simplify without cookie cuttering. We're also going to talk about application of costs and tiers, because one of the things we hear loud and clear is how are we going to pay for this? And then one of the things we're very excited about is there's a wealth of data and analytics now that help us be more meaningful about where to spend and how to do it. And that's how we're going to frame our discussion. So we're looking forward to get started. Gina, do you want to get started with this?
Yeah, we're going to be realists, apparently. I think you said that. All right, let's start with how to extend your North Star into an optimized network of formats. So last year, we talked a lot about the North Star and what that means for your future branch experience or your branch of the future, and made the point that your North Star is actually a never-ending journey to create and get to your branch of the future. But the important point to remember is that your North Star is actually always changing. It's constantly iterating with internal and external forces of change. External forces of change like new technologies, digital disruption, the entire fintech landscape, evolving consumer expectations. Every consumer's expectation of doing business is changed every time the iPhone has a new operating system update. And then the changing competitive landscape. In your individual markets, you have new competitors coming to the table. Internal forces of change, mergers, acquisitions, expanding markets into new markets, renovating your network, critical upgrades, and then brand changes. Are you rebranding? Do you have cultural initiatives? All of these things are affecting your North Star. Now what we want to talk about even further, your North Star is not a single branch design. It is actually a spectrum of formats, and that's likely not news to you, but we want to reiterate it. Some of the key consideration factors when thinking about this spectrum and what it is, the most obvious one is size, and it is definitely no news that size is trending down, and for good reason. Another factor is automation, which is of course trending up. And then finally, and perhaps the most confusing one of all, is the trend of new purpose and new functionality. What is a branch for? Is it a cafe? Is it a business lounge? What is it? And that is, of course, trending up as well. So these are the things to consider when thinking about your network of formats. Now, ultimately, in those formats, the key is balancing cost with experience. How do I get the maximum leverage for the minimum spend? So you have efficiency categories, so to speak, that are affecting cost. Square footage, first and foremost. FTE, secondarily. Automation. And then implementation tiers of enhancement that we're going to talk about. On the experience side, however, so these are all things that are costing a lot or less, depending on how you weigh them. On the experience side, you have the interior aesthetic and your exterior impact. Don't ever minimize your exterior impact, which is the only thing driving acquisition and presence. Your culture, the actual service and quality of people in your space. Technology enablement, interactive technology, digital communications technology, and scale and overall impact. So how do you balance getting the most experience effectiveness with the least cost, aka efficiency? And something to keep in mind, as size decreases, the zones of experience are going to have more radical shifts in design and in staffing because you have these zones of experience that are condensing and overlapping on top of one another, and you have to be smarter and more deliberate with your design decisions. So you see a 3,000 square foot and a 1,500 square foot, and you can see how the zones of experience are starting to collapse on themselves. So let's look at a case in point example. This is Eastern Bank, and these are their 4 formats. So what we've got in their largest format is a full service, their full version of full service, but it's only just over 2,200 square feet. The purpose of this branch is in key markets with an extensive, all of their lines of business in the branch. But then they have this micro format at 1,100 square feet, and this was honestly their real branch of the future North Star starting point. And this micro branch is for key markets with a lot of population density in more urban locations where they were willing to invest and they needed maximum presence, but couldn't take up that much square footage for cost reasons. And then cashless. This branch is 390 square feet. No cash at all. These are in sub-markets, so their primary markets are getting micro and full, their sub-markets are getting cashless, and then in markets that are their least potential of importance or markets they've exited, they have self-service only with ITMs to actually retain customers even after market exit. So as we think about these formats, we now have to think about all of the functional components that go within them. And remember, it is hard to design small branches. You have to make very purposeful, very deliberate, and very difficult decisions about what can fit or not fit in them. And for Eastern, this is showing by format the spectrum of both functional components and support components and what is going in what branch. So let's take a look at this micro format. This is the 1,100 square foot branch. This branch is actually in Harvard Square, a lot of pedestrian traffic. And a few things that you'll notice, there's a 24-hour vestibule that takes up maybe a fourth of the branch real estate. One of their key strategic decisions was migrating to the ITM. So this talk to teller, you can see it with sort of the orange fins in that photograph, is what's closest to the window, so it had maximum visibility, and the vestibule is, of course, a 24-hour vestibule. Some other things you'll notice inside, there's 2 consult offices, but one of them has fully retractable walls, so you can actually extend it to being part of the larger, although it's not that large, space. And then this is what it looks like. So some things that are really important from an exterior presence is color space, owning your color space. We're making use of their brand blue. They can't own brand blue, but we're accenting it with their orange. We have their ITM front facing, a digital screen, and then nighttime. This branch has got to sing and operate at night for maximum brand beacon glowing presence. Then let's look at this 390 square foot cashless format. So this is primarily for presence, and what is interesting here, we heard in the last panel about the importance of people and the people migration to ITMs. They have had zero problems migrating all of their customers to the 24-hour vestibule to use that ITM. Even elderly people, they have successfully migrated them because the staff understands how to do it, and it hasn't been a problem at all. Do not lose the consult functionality when you go to this square footage. They had to make a decision between a teller pod or a consult office, and they chose consult because ultimately the future purpose of your branch is consultation. This is what it looks like. It's dumped in parking lots with heavy retail traffic in malls and centers. This is daytime, and this is nighttime. Impactful both ways. So the takeaways of extending your North Star into formats. They need to balance maximum input, impact with minimum cost, and as size decreases, you have more radical shifts in design and staffing.
So as you're thinking about this is maybe one of your levels of the access. The other access is thinking about implementation tiers, and that's what we want to talk about next. Branches aren't born equal. Opportunities aren't born equal. And if you really embrace this idea of your physical network is your message to the community, how serious you are about that neighborhood. And in those branch of the future initiatives, there's a lot of thinking, but as you think back to your network, and a lot of you are acquiring networks. So you've acquired networks that weren't your ideas. So they're not your fault, but they're yours to deal with. And so we think this idea really works well, and it's kind of your duty with a physical distribution. It's an opportunity and it can be a liability. So thinking about how to extend your money. So as we go into this, we really want to think about a couple of different things. And one of them is the idea of visual versus operational. And I'll have Gina continue the slides here. As you think about this, you never really want to do one without the other, meaning we never want to update a location without a visual update. However, an operational update isn't always necessary, or quite candidly can be justified. So thinking about it that way is a great way to approach your network and opportunity. How about cost? If we had unlimited budgets and there's a bunch of CFOs here that were excited, this would be an easier thing to do. But we know that's your problem as you go back. You guys come back and you've had a lot of energy, you've got good ideas, you've taken pictures of slides, and there's no initiative to move forward. You've got to know where to stop, and thinking about, Gina mentioned the idea of leverage and applying the right solutions. And if you think about branding and retail communications, that's a must if you've rebranded your organization, you've bought another organization, maybe that's your first tier. However, we've seen visual solutions get very expensive. Maybe there's architectural detailing. A big trend we're seeing, forever the interior was the focus, and now you're dealing with the exterior as well. If you spend $300,000 on an interior renovation and leave the outside of the bank looking like your grandmother's house, no one's coming in. You've wasted your money. So that's how we're thinking about the visual tiers. To compound things, then you've got your operational changes, and that's a bigger investment. And notice we've not reduced or eliminated the visual change, but you do have now an operational change. Luckily, you're thinking about efficiencies. Hopefully, you're getting higher engagement. It's going to be additive in terms of the visits, et cetera, but there's investments to make. The teller lines come out. You've got investment in equipment, and you've heard that this morning. So, one of the things we're hearing is people are on all different levels of their journey. Some people have piloted and made mistakes. Some are about to start. Some big networks are way down the road. Other big networks don't know where to start. So thinking about this spectrum and finding where it is by site, and we think about it in these kind of buckets. A refresh. A refresh can also mean, I don't want to close this location, but I want them to know I'm not closing this location. So maybe that's the $35,000 investment. A transitional is maybe we're not reimagining the entire space, but we are going to make it more operationally focused on successful employees and the visit needs of our current clientele versus the way it was designed before. And then transformative. And that's whether we have an existing building, we have a piece of land. We're thinking about it the same way. The analytics have said we want to be here, the opportunity is here, and we're transforming. And you can see those budgets go up to $1 million or so. Let's show you a couple of examples of how this builds out. Exterior signage, we mentioned it. I think thinking about exterior branding and attracting, thinking about this concept of perceived convenience. That's a real thing, and that's one of the big reasons you have physical branches. I'm not sure I need it right now, but I see them, and it looks innovative and thought forward. And so you've got to think about exterior. As you think about business change, the construction goes up, and then you've got equipment costs as well. So you're always thinking about those. But let's show you a couple of examples. This is a visual change. Gina's going to end with some of the analytics we're using. One of the things we say is if you see belt and suspenders, keep the spin down. We've got to be careful not to off-put your client. And so this is an organization in a city center. They've acquired a bank 180 miles out of the city center. So we're talking about refreshing. And let's see what we spent on this, Gina. So $75,000. We asked the gentleman to step aside, but he's still happy. The architectural detailing has just been covered. We didn't have the money to tear that wall out. Quite candidly, with the consumer base, the teller line is fine. We're not closing the branch. The teller line is fine. But we need to be more proud of the location if we're going to put our name on it. And the competition is saying they bought it, they're going to close it. And that's not the case for $75,000. These guys are supposed to go to dinner with us tomorrow night. We'll hope they still do. We keep showing their before pictures. This picture is 2 years old. The typewriter is 30 years old. The head of retail saying, we're having a hard time recruiting people for this location. I'd rather work at Comcast than have people complain. It's not transformational. This is not in one of their key growth markets, but it's a market they are staying in. And so we've gone up a tier here. And so this is a pretty massive transformation. The reason we're not calling it a full transformation, you're going to see the orientation of our pod is still to an opening where the drive-up sits. Why didn't we use that low-hanging fruit, ITM and the drive-ups? You've heard it as best practice. Here, the lanes were too small, and the justification wasn't there to spend the money. So it doesn't mean you don't do it, but you apply the right level of change. And you can see it's a visual change. It's an energy change. There's music, there's scent, they're recruiting people, and we didn't break the budget. It wasn't cheap, is what he'll tell you, but appropriate. And then you've got this one. This is at the base of our headquarters, and we've just rung the bell on NASDAQ, and we've rapidly grown from $800 million to $3 billion bank. We're going to transform the space. So here's a transformational change. ITM's in the drive up. We're no longer worried about where that drive up and the teller line needs to be. We don't worry about it. There's great bankers somewhere else taking care of the drive up. You can see this is in South Louisiana. The contractor said, we'd never put a floor on the ceiling. I mean, it's an innovative space. But this is part of the idea. They are doing some very innovative things in their North Star locations, but this is an example of going backwards. Because if you have a North Star and you have Pepper and you have all these things and you have 80% of your network like the before pictures, you're going to have leakage on your brand. Here finally, you're still closing some of these to pay for it. Gina's going to finish up and talk to us a little bit about, how do you pick the right amount? And if you close something, have a receiver branch nearby that gets the appropriate level. And we'll touch on this a little bit and talk a little bit more about it in our roundtable tomorrow. But to follow up, there's a spectrum of visual to operational, and you've got to find the right tier. And Gina's going to tell you how to use some data maybe to help decide if the belt and suspenders isn't always there as an idea.
So with only a couple minutes left, we're going to show you slides with massive amounts of content on them and go through them really quickly, and they'll be kind of painless. But you have to use analytics to align branch investment with potential and purpose. And actually, most simply, most branch strategies are simply just not aligned with marketing. Branch and marketing, facilities and marketing are not talking to each other in the way they should. Starting with just aligning the branch experience with market potential, which is actually quite simple. So you begin with the current state of the branch experience and just create a scorecard. What are the different categories? We believe they're exterior, interior, architectural conditions, and retail communications. And then how does that start to allocate into sub-tiers and ultimately scores that look like this? By location, by section, and then you start ranking overall priority. And this is just a 1 to 5 spectrum scale. We then take that and start aligning it with market potential. How do we determine market potential? Well, there's more traditional methods, GIS, location services, demographics, psychographics, age, income, business concentration. This is an example of using those tools to create a market valuation models for one of our clients that's trying to figure out how to expand into the entire state of Florida. And this is showing the most opportunity by area. Then we have mobile data that's starting to track where customers are going. It's kind of big brothery and scary, but it's good for you from a marketing and branch planning perspective. These dots represent branch traffic before and after, 2 hours before and after visiting a branch, and actually identifies areas of opportunity for new branch locations. And then getting even more kind of creepy, scary, there are beacon services now that can track traffic right in and outside of your branch and know everything about these people. And you can use this to determine everything from their lifestyle to how they use banking services to what foot traffic is in different branches and in and around different areas. So all kinds of data that ultimately can connect your current branch experience with your market potential and yield a priority ranking. And then once you have that priority ranking, you can weigh that against your format selection factors, the size, the automation, the functionality, and new functionality potential. And that is ultimately, in short, that's easy, right? That you can totally do that in a few seconds. And that's how you determine what to spend. And then finally, analyzing for the bigger picture, how do you determine ROI? And there's shorter term ROI levers like before and after metrics, FTE reduction, before and after metrics like origination and easy things you can track. And then channel migration, the longer tail, leading into even longer term ROI you can get with external market research, qualitative testing. How is your brand impact on your market? So ultimately, weigh potential market against current branch experience to prioritize and align branch priority with format considerations to assign tiers.
So tomorrow we'll be at the roundtable, we'll be in our booth. If you want to talk more about this increasing challenge, merging, acquiring networks, network or North Star going forward, or dealing with North Star going backwards, we're happy to continue the discussion. Thank you.